Reducing thatch and improving drainage with PRM. This is season 2. I spoke in the spring, went over 2018 results. I'm going to touch on them briefly, but overall, I've only got 20 minutes, so I'd really like to have you guys walk away with three major walkaway points. To be able to identify what 3 components make up a holistic turf management program, what are the 3 biggest problems in turf, and why traditional management practices aren't enough to manage turf grass. So I'm going to start with Doug Soldat. I took a soil class from him a couple years ago. I stole a couple slides from him. These are his words. So the biggest problems in turf: compaction, thatch, layering, organic matter, and poor drainage. So for the case of this presentation, I'm going to simplify it, move thatch, layering, organic matter. I'm just going to call that thatch, compaction, and drainage. So these are the 3 metrics that I'm going to use to make the argument throughout this presentation. So we'll start with thatch. What is it? Dr. Kopech went through thatch management, physical management practices in depth yesterday, so we're all pretty familiar right now. It's shoots, stems, and roots consisting of live and dead material, and it's constituted of the inputs that you put in to your management program, your fertilizers, your nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, other nutrients, and micros is what actually constitutes the thatch. What does thatch do? It decreases infiltration, acts like a sponge, inhibits roots, enables compaction, and those are the negative factors of it. There are also some positive factors, like Dr. Kopech spoke about, the resilience of the turf and ability to handle traffic. But over a certain point, thatch becomes a problem that we're trying to manage constantly in this industry. So how do you manage thatch? Mainly all physical practices. We core aerify, we verticut, we solid time, we top dress, we hit it with air. These are all physical management practices. And so here's the first point. A holistic turf grass management program consists of chemical, physical, and biological management practices. And relating to thatch accumulates when grass grows. So when we fertilize, we exacerbate the thatch problem on golf courses. Physical management practices, corification, solid tine, venting, this all helps mitigate the problem by disturbing the thatch layer or removing material. But overall, what I'm going to show you today is that it's not enough to take steps to reduce thatch across playing surfaces. And so I'll show you data. PRM is a biological management service that provides microbes that break down the thatch in the soil. So I have an iceberg problem. Last year I took about 2,000 data points in the field. This year over 6,000. So I'm only going to be able to touch on it a little bit today, but we're going to focus again on thatch, compaction, and infiltration. And hopefully have some time to talk at the end. We're going to focus on thatch, compaction, and infiltration again. And a little bit of root, highlight on roots, because roots are awesome. So if you remember the presentation from last year, here's a few shots of river birch. We identified a control plot and a test plot outlined in black here. Just a few different angles to get familiar. We ran a six-week program, heavy program on this area, and produced some significant results. What happened beneath the soil? It looks great above it. Let's dive into what PRM actually did for this. So these soil cores are taken from the control side. If you notice, it's about 2 inches of thatch across. The roots are barely touching the soil. So that thatch is blocking the plant from getting into the soil. And then on the test plot where we ran PRM, we reduced the thatch, reduced compaction, improved root depth and infiltration rates. And as a result, you see the quality of turf is much higher, much denser, much better color. higher quality. So here are a couple graphs from last year that demonstrate the point that I'm trying to make is that regarding thatch, here's spring and fall. We've got control is black and test, or PRM, is green. From spring to fall, we didn't make a difference in thatch. We actually had thatch grow about 5%, which is nominal. But with PRM, we were able to actually make a substantial difference in the thatch layering on the fairway at River Birch and reduced it by about 20%. Not surprisingly, the infiltration rate of the PRM went up significantly on the fairway. The control plot increased about 10%, or about 5% of the increase we saw with PRM, mainly due to what Clint was doing as physical management practices. He was out there tearing it up and top dressing, both the test and the control. But with PRM, with the biological management practices, we were actually able to make a significant headway against the thatch problem on the fairway at River Birch. So, I like to run programs at scale across the entire golf course. This is what we've been doing at Hillcrest for 2 years. Fortunately, we've had some great results, but unfortunately, we haven't had a control. Really excited to share this with you guys today because I have a scaled site where I've been able to run PRM on 9 holes with same management practices, all else aside. We've got 2 different pump stations, one on the front, one on the back. And as I said, the same management practices across both 9s. And this was about 4,600 data points that led into this. So Eagle Hills Golf Course this year, we ran on the front 9. Here are a few before and after pictures. We got started a little late in July, but took data on July 17th and September 20th. We'll just show a couple photos of before and after before we get into the charts. But significant quality improvements, turf density, color, some signs of heat stress before out here in the fairway. I don't know if you guys can see that, but after. Side by side. Here's another view. This is 7 fairway. Looking at the green. The improvement 2 months later, and side by side where you see the heat stress here, it's absent after 2 months of running. So what's going on beneath the soil? I wanted to show you guys a couple profiles here. So this is on 5T before. We've got, this is about 6 inches down. Fairly healthy profile, but after running PRM, we were able to get down, probably your average is between 8 and 9 there on total depth. Your thatch is decreasing, you're reducing compaction, and those roots are driving into the soil. Another example on 7T, I had to include these photos because this was amazing. Before, we're about 6 inches. After, we're down. I was banging my knuckles on every one of these probes. So 17 inches down, and there were roots poking out from the bottom of these that you could pretty much floss your teeth with. I mean, they were thick. So, data, charts. Here we have thatch reduction on tees. We're going to go through the different playing surfaces, tees, greens, fairways. Before is black. July, after is green. We've got PRM on the left. We've got the control on the right. These are the thatch layers that are a result from growing grass and top dressing. So we see a significant decrease in thatch layers across all layers for an average of about 38% thatch reduction across the profile with PRM. And without PRM, we see, essentially no change, or a 5% growth in thatch layer overall on tees. So to hammer it in, the physical management practices for thatch not holding up to par. We're essentially losing the battle here by having that thatch accumulate over the course of the season. Another look at tees, we've got probe depth, which is just a look at compaction, essentially, before, after, and a control that is essentially no change from spring, or from July to September, where we reduced compaction by about 70% with PRM. And the root zone, less compaction, more infiltration, less thatch. Your root zone is growing substantially, about 67% with PRM, and the control actually saw a 16% decrease over the course from July to September. Taking a look at greens, we have very similar trends. We've got thatch breakdown with PRM at about 34% across all the layers. Without PRM or our control, we're looking at little to no change, if not, a 5% gain overall in thatch accumulation on greens. Fairways, just wanted to call out all playing surfaces here. We've got PRM on the left, the control on the right. This is the layer of thatch sitting on top of the soil. With PRM, we were able to reduce it by 37% over this 2-month period. Without it, we actually lost some ground. Thatch accumulated about 12% from July to September on the control plots, the control fairways. And then here is compaction. This was the biggest loss on the control, was compaction was accumulating by about 16 to 23%. I measured compaction with a probe depth or a Dickey-John penetrometer. So the graph on the right is the Dickey-John penetrometer, pressure gauge. You go down until you reach 300 psi, you take the measurement. The taller the bar, the better. In inverse relation, the further the probe goes into the ground, the less compaction you have, the healthier your soil is. Infiltration rates, this is just overall. Greens, tees, fairways, all included in this chart because it would be far too much data to go over. We've got the control on the left where we actually had a significant decrease in infiltration over the course of these 2 months that we're looking at. This number is related to your compaction increasing, your thatch increasing on those control surfaces, whereas we're decreasing the thatch, decreasing the compaction, and increasing the infiltration rate, which is seen right here, by about 15% overall. So, the takeaways. With PRM and biological soil management practices, incorporating them into our turfgrass management program, we're breaking down thatch, we're improving infiltration, and we're reducing compaction. And based on the data from Eagle Hills and River Birch, where we have identified controls, I think it's pretty empirical at this point that traditional management practices lacking in biological management are losing the battle against thatch. How much time? We got about 5 minutes. So Hillcrest Year 2, we'll cruise through this and try to leave a couple minutes for questions. Similar trends here. This is 2018, this is 2019. We ran PRM wall to wall at Hillcrest through the pump station, through every sprinkler head on the property. We start off in a better place with thatch in 2019 as a result of the reductions in 2018. You can see layer 1 started off much lower in the spring of 19 than 18, and we're making progress breaking down the thatch. Here's roots, trying to limit it to compaction, but compaction, infiltration, and thatch, but we're seeing root zones increase across greens, tees, and fairways consistently year after year, in year 1 and year 2. Infiltration or drainage improvements as a result of breaking down the thatch, reducing compaction, and we're increasing infiltration across playing surfaces here. This is the beginning of 2019 in May. In September, when I took the final set of data, there's an increase relationship there. We also ran a greens program at Pinecrest with Mark this year. Had some pretty good results there. Was out there early in May, took some photos and some data. Before and after photos here. Some profiles from May, July, and September. Overall, we're reducing compaction. We're driving this probe deeper and deeper into the soil. The roots are following it. Like I said, with those roots at Eagle Hills on 17, these roots that Mark was growing on his greens, they were resilient. I bet you could flash your teeth with them. They were so strong. Pinecrest infiltration improvement. Overall, this was the putter, but overall we had a 17% increase on the greens that we looked at this year. Probe depth, inverse to compaction, so we're reducing compaction over time. Over the course of the year, we ran the green program by an average of about 90%. We reduced thatch over the course of the year. We expanded the roots. Here's a look at thatch reduction on the third green. Your layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 decreasing over time. So we reduced thatch, we reduced compaction, and we increased infiltration at Pinecrest, just like the other properties. And here's a look at one of those roots. That's all the way to the probe handle. So about 16 inches, that root is still reaching out beyond the profile there. Kind of running out of time. I'll just show you some quick photos on river birch. We scaled the trial up from a plot to a fairway this year. In this photo, you can kind of see the density and quality and color increases on the surface. You won't be surprised to see we broke down thatch and drove roots into the soil, so we were able to get these roots to reach down through the thatch layer by breaking it down and actually tap into the soil, reducing compaction and thatch. This is thatch across 3 different spots on the fairway that I looked at. One was that area we ran last year, so we started off with much less thatch than we did the other 2 plots, and we were still able to make progress against thatch. Reduction in compaction across all surfaces. Compaction wasn't as bad where we ran last year in 2018 compared to where we were starting fresh in 2019. So we were able to start a little better on that green rectangle that was in the middle of the fairway. Infiltration improvements across all 3 spots. Reduced thatch, reduced compaction, increased infiltration. Trying to drive that home. Here's a view of year 1 versus year 2. And then wrapping this up, I want to quote Doug with, "The biological properties are the new frontier." We don't know a lot about biological properties other than they're complicated and they appear to be very important. And so that's where PRM comes in. We design these programs, we implement the systems in order to incorporate biological management practices into your turfgrass management program. So to wrap things up, what 3 components make up a holistic turfgrass management program? Physical, chemical, and biological management practices. Walk away with that one. What are the 3 biggest problems in turf? Compaction, thatch, and drainage, or infiltration. And why are traditional practices not enough? Well, because we're not making headway against the battle against thatch and compaction with physical and chemical management practices alone. We need to incorporate biological into our management programs to make this progress. So a special thanks to Dr. Brian Horgan, my mentor. Great Lakes Turf School taught me a lot about turfgrass, and Lori Russell for giving me the opportunity to present and talk to you guys in the spring and this fall. So thanks, guys.
A quick question. Any data on water usage or waste control in your control versus your plot areas has it used?
Talk to me after. I don't have anything prepared for that, but we can have a conversation about water savings on the side. But all this feeds into reduced inputs, reduced water, reduced fertility, and long run, so catch up with me after this. All right, thanks guys, I'm out of time.